Hey, what's up, everybody? Matt from Rocky's War Room, and welcome to Antares Adventures, episode 11. 11 episodes. I never thought I'd get this far.
It's gone out of hand.
That's right. So today we're going to be talking about how to get started as a beginner in the hobby and beyond the gates of Antares, how to get started in that. Also, maybe go over what the stat lines mean for beginners. Maybe they don't know, or they haven't played, or they haven't gone to the rule book or something like that, and possibly some good starter lists and starter points, and go from there. So let's get the show on the road.
Yeah.
So today I have with me Tim Bancroft.
Hello.
Tabletop Warlords Kevin and Sergey.
What's up, guys?
And the most important man for this episode, not Jay.
Hola. How are y'all?
Oh, man. I'm doing good. We got some comments already. So we're talking about beginners. Beginners to Antares. Antares obviously is a 28 millimeter, if you're listening or watching to this, you should know by now. 28 millimeter science fiction game extraordinaire. It's so different from everything else. It's brilliant. And one of the brainchilds is right down here, Tim Bancroft. And we all got started.
That was. I have to say that was mostly Rick.
Rick. Yes, he is the brainchild, but Rick and Tim. But he's with us. That's why I said you. Rick's
Ruben. Yeah, the kind of you. I was just saying hello to Ruben.
Oh yes, hello Ruben. Anyway, so most of us got started on one or two starter sets, and mine was the original starter set with the Gar and the Concorde, and then there was Strike on Car 9, and I was like, ooh. So I got them both, but it's a good place to start, I think. But I'll let you guys, the Warlord expert and the tabletop Warlord experts, say where they got started. Where'd you guys get started? When you were a beginner, what drew you to it?
Right. What really drew? I saw it on the Kickstarter, the very early Kickstarter, where they were hoping to do all sorts of things. So I was actually following that for a while. I downloaded the Antares beta rules and played with them, but I wasn't over keen on. I saw a lot of the comments in the forums. I wasn't over keen on contributing to that in the way it was being done. So I just played along with the beta set and didn't do much. But I thought actually this is a great set of rules. Fundamentally fantastic. Then they brought out the Zolos Horizon with a whole load of stuff in it. And that was the very first Antares thing I actually bought. I was really pleased. I like that. I know there's this trend for about the 40 quid mark over here, which is what Car A9 was targeted at. But for me, I liked the Zolos Horizon because it had the pin markers in it. It had the rest of the templates in it. It had two really decent forces. It had loads of Concorde, as well as a whole bunch of Gar, and I really, really loved the Gar suits as well. So you had two units of Gar in it as well, and then you had the big solid rule book in it as well, and you had a whole bunch of dice in it as well, and I can't remember. And you then had a picture in it, and you then had a transmat in it, which I built as well. One of the early Sarissa prototype transmat, which the current transmats don't look like that at all. So that's what drew me into it. Was the game, and then reading up some of the bits about the background, which I fell in love with, and then they brought out the box, which was sort of I don't know how much it was, 80 or 90 quid at the time, and I went for that because it had everything I wanted, and I thought, yep, I can get into this and play the game and go, if you like. It was that. So it's seeing a really nice set of rules that I liked, seeing a great background that I liked, and then they brought out a box which was just, for me, just perfect. So
I love the Gar.
Yeah.
I took one look at that Gar and went, yes.
I did the same thing, yep.
You can do so much with those Gar battle suits. They're just great. I mean, I have them in various poses as far as I can. They look like they're battlefield poses, you know, with arms like this. But actually, I was just trying to make them do different disco moves at the time. So
You can tell by the way I use my walk. That's so funny. And I think we were pretty similar with Tim. I mean, it was just, I mean, I think me and Sergey both had about 3 or 4 like 40K armies that were in various states of decay. And I at one point just looked up, I was like, science fiction wargaming. I was like, I want something new. I want something cool. And I think it was the YouTube presence at the time. I saw a few folks playing it, and it's just a sweet game. And yeah, exactly. That's where I'm riding for the first time vicariously. But yeah, just like Tim said, basically, it has so much stuff in the starter set, and a lot of other games do comparable things, but none of the ones that I was into. I mean, it has literally everything you need to play in one box, which is super nice, and especially now when you're getting the full-size rulebook at the moment. It's insane.
Yep.
See, that's the other great thing about Car 8. It was actually aimed at 40 quid, and I think it was actually I'm not sure, but I think it was Andy Hobday's brainchild, full stop, to actually try and hit that market. So it had almost everything in it that you wanted, but they cut down the number of plastics. You had 2 plastics sprues or three Algorand plastics and 2 Concord plastics. Then it had most of the rest in it, and they had a small cut down paperback rulebook. But now, as you said, they've got the full size rulebook, which is just great. I don't think people really appreciated that the cut down rulebook was just there just to try and get people going, because online we can't have a beginner show without mentioning it, and that's the Nexus.
Oh, absolutely.
You can actually download those things on the Nexus. So which is, just in case nobody knows, www.gatesofantares.com, and there's loads of stuff in there. You can start from the section which is getting started.
Yeah.
And
well,
it's really great that you don't have to download the codices. I guess we could call them codices. But the army lists are all free online, which is another huge barrier to point of entry in a lot of other war games. Like to build your first 500 point Warhammer army, you have to buy like $100 rulebook plus another like $40 rulebook plus like a $50 army. And
what do you mean $50 army?
Okay,
$50
like a $150 army. And if you're a kid trying to afford that with his after school job, well, that was like 3 weeks of pay to play a game that you might not like.
Yeah, no, that's true. And the fact that you can get those army books online for free is also one of the, like you said, it was one of the big things that brought us in, because when you're talking about getting into a game, I always, the way I do it, I always want to look at a rule book first, as fast as I can, to kind of get like an understanding of what it's going to be like, but then the advantage of having the army books for free is that you can see the layout of an army, because that's also important, because I feel like a lot of people do this, and I'm one of them. I'm just like, that looks cool, that looks cool, that looks cool, that looks cool. And your heart's full of all these things.
I want that, and I want that, and I want that.
The cannons. This is bull.
Shiny, it's the new shiny. I think it's a trap that a lot of wargamers fall into.
It is.
Well, see, the thing is, though, who says I can't have 3 D cannons or whatever they are?
Well,
just because they're not in the approved army list doesn't mean I can't.
Las cannons, come on, not Jay.
I said D cannon.
Oh, okay.
Or whatever, X cannon, whatever the hell this thing is. It looks like a growth.
X howitzer.
X howitzer. Is that what that is? The thing that looks like a growth.
Yeah,
I love the X howitzer.
I don't like the look of the Isaurians.
I do not like the look of the
Isaurians. The X howitzer.
We give lists, and it was Rick's. Rick is always a little bit hazy about points values, as he's been made quite clear in his book about designing war. But people want some idea, especially coming into a game from the start, what it is that will provide them with a balanced game of some kind. So you've got to come up with some way of roughly comparing points. And frankly, you just don't, you cannot come up with points that are fair in every situation because they're so dependent on the individuals and the way that they use their armies and whether or not they're actually good at using, say, for example, a combined arms force as opposed to a tailored force and all the rest of it. I mean, we've played loads and loads of games that we didn't use any lists at all. Or people just, I want to use this. And it's sort of fine. Exactly as you said, not Jay. Is who says you can't do it? Well, actually, it's only just an official list. And if you want to do it your own way, that's not a problem.
I've just made it a realization that that I can tell whether someone is a quote new gamer or an old time gamer.
Yeah.
An old time gamer probably started gaming with Dungeons and Dragons of some permutation, whether it's Red Book, the old, red box like me, or even, someone that played 3rd edition, 4th edition, what have you, because they are going to be the gamer who is looking to tell stories with their games, not caught up with points, has creativity to, doesn't need to be spoon-fed.
That's the key thing about Antares. You've knocked, I think we've got to stop there because I'll interrupt you there because that is absolutely the key thing about Antares, not Jay. That's
right.
The thing I think which sets it apart from so many other games. And that's what I think newcomers have to expect is it's there for the creativity. The points don't work that well, but if you want to tell stories, if you want a game which generates a narrative as it goes forward, this is it. And I think we have to really say that. And
I would contest one point there. I think the points do actually work pretty well. When you compare it, well, yeah, and I am a power gamer. Like for all intents and purposes, I'm a power gamer. Although I did start with D&D. That was the first game I played. But the points in Antares are actually fairly balanced. As opposed in that there's no alpha strategy in Antares that is fundamentally broken. And when those alpha strategies do show up, Tim, you and Rick are pretty quick about eliminating them from like when the strategy of like spamming 1 million weapons teams came up, it was pretty quickly banned from tournaments.
I refuse to give up my twin mag gun.
Kevin was
my twin mag light support.
Multiple twin mag light supports. Yeah.
I'm gonna have a quad.
But I would say this game, due to the fact that most armies pull from similar weapons types and have fairly even points costs across the board, I would argue that it's significantly more balanced than something like Age of Sigmar, where the balance system is more towards finding out what is better as opposed to everything being the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that comes back to what is the nub of the game. What is that core? I don't know, you could say mechanic. What is a core mechanic? And one of the main things about the Warhammer-derived rule sets, all the rest of it, is army building. It is that point system, it's that army building, it's trying to work out what's going on, where you can actually get the most bang for your buck. And that's fine. Some people love doing that, and that's great. But in Antares, it's fundamentally about order dice, which is in some ways what the issue was with, say, the Rebels, was they could just get so many, weapons to that it was just ridiculous. As I said, somebody asked, I might have mentioned it, but they said they wanted to prepare for a tournament. Could I help? So I said, well, I can run what I think is the worst ever army against you. And he said, yeah. Okay, let's see what happens. So I picked Rebels, and I had something like 10 weapons teams in a 1,000-point army, and then the rest was command crawler, a few suits, and this, lot, and the other. And I put the fuss load on the table, and he said, "Well, where's the rest?" And I said, "Well, they said they're not coming on. They're just waiting to come on in next turn." And he just looked at him and he said, "So what do you mean you're only using half your force?" I said, "Yes, but you can't break me now because more than half of my dice are off the table." And that is that is the sort of example of stuff which we just have to try and fix, have to try and repair. Because that's not what was intended at all with the dice system or with the Rebel Army. I think Rick was warned about it. I remember having a chat with Nick, who was also on the early design things. And Nick was really worried that the mechanic would get picked up, and it does get picked up. So it's just something we've just got to be careful of. Anyway, what were you saying, Jay? We rudely butted in.
That's quite all right. All right.
Narrative stuff. I was so excited and pick up that key point.
And that's probably when Matt. Well, I knew about Beyond the Gates of Antares back when I still lived in Austin, and there was a lot of buzz about it. But for whatever reason, well, the game store that I went to was. This is going to sound silly. Historically historical. It was a historical miniatures game store. We had a lot of Flames of War, lots of Civil War games, lots of Ancients. Field of Glory was huge. Napoleonics, World War II, other than, it's where I learned Chain of Command, etc. But gamers being gamers, when, something hot and new is being flashed about, especially with the name Rick Priestley attached to it, it gets some traction, but it never really went anywhere. So, it kind of fell off the radar for me, especially when I moved away from being able to go to that store. And so I really had no contact with it, no context whatsoever of exactly what's going on, because in the back of my brain, it's like, oh, it's going to end up being another 40K wannabe that's not going to go anywhere. And,
prove you wrong.
Hey, I'm happy it did. But until I met up with Matt, who is all kinds of stupid about the game. I mean, stupid. That's 2 words there.
There's a cool poster up here.
Yeah, right.
And if it makes the wall, I'm into it.
So, but he started showing me all the models, and he actually had me over to play a big game of it, and so what really drew me to it was the fact that it is, it's very much, it can, even though there are points, it seems like the points are suggestions.
Yeah.
If you want to have a balanced game, God, why would you? Then you can have I can have 1,500 points of my guys, and you can have 1,500 points of your guys, and we're going to come in the middle and smash. That's all well and good, but that's not my type of game. The fact that there's so much history within the game, in the in-game universe, there's so much history. There's so much backstory that if you really dive in and you really get to like what the Algren are all about, you can start creating stories of their advancement throughout the universe. Yeah. And when the Algren skimmers come along and meet up with the Concord, whatever dudes, and they start start fighting over the same piece of ground, well, then I can now tell my story with these cool models using these really good rules, and I don't have to worry about points.
Yeah, and that brings us around to one of the best things, in my opinion, about Antares, and it's something that, like, I never really enjoyed asymmetrical narrative scenarios at all in other systems. I always thought that they were like really unbalanced, and they kind of never ended up being fun because it was just like somebody gets stomped and nothing really happens. But Antares has done a really good job with coming out with narrative scenarios that are balanced and fun. They are tactical and also tell a really awesome story. And I'm sure Kevin is going to have a bunch to talk about this because he loves narrative scenarios. But
I love narrative scenarios. Screw points.
I think Antares does that a lot. Something about the rule system makes Antares handle asymmetrical armies better.
Well, I think a big aspect of that is the Swiss Army knife nature of a lot of the units and stuff, and then the similarity between units. You know what I mean? Like if you're slapdashing together for some reason, like let's say, Nache's got the Freeborn, Sergei's got the Algorand. As long as you're like matching units, it's generally speaking pretty even. I mean, there's, you know what I mean? Like there's so much similarity in the armaments and the stat lines of basic troops that as long as you have a generally speaking even set on both sides, you can do a lot, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And you just won't see that in a lot of other games because of the insane variation on a unit, you know what I mean? And so that's really cool. And then just like Sergei said, I love narrative scenarios. And it's just, I think the cool part about them is that the narrative scenarios that are presented, the narrative campaigns, because that's another thing, is that every campaign in Antares is a narrative driven campaign, which is so. I mean, you could do 6 Let Battles Begin and one after another. And I'm sure Sergei would love that. It's like I took another inch of. What was that, Sam?
It's not what Antares is good at, and it's not what it's aimed at. I mean, just having 6. I would just go spare if it was just head to head. Fighting all the time, because it's just not what Antares is good at, nor what it's aimed at, nor what it actually. I don't know. That takes out the narrative element, which takes away a lot of the fun. And it's just not there.
And like the way that the actual game plays out too is that it's like, you can do match scenario over and over and over again, and that's, you know what I mean, like it will be fun. But when you're using the same rules, like nothing is cooler than being like, I have got to get this artifact to the ship, and you're like have 3 pins, and you're like, I got to take this command check, and if I fail, my people are going to be subject to, enemy fire from every angle. And then you have the other unit that's deciding, like, should I shoot at the Boramites that are, quickly approaching, or do I run and take that artifact because I know those guys are screwed? And that right there turned so many situations into a nail biter. I cannot tell you how many times me and Sergei have been like so I have. It's either like I'll kick the crap out of Sergei or the other way around. But both of us are happier than clams because I'm like, I can't believe your commander just jumped off that building and murdered my dude and won. Like, you know what I mean? Like the end of the Bronvar campaign literally was like it was to the last line. And
like, the final order dice decided the winner of the Bronvar campaign, and it came down to a roll.
It was so great. But the other aspect that I really enjoyed, some people might not agree with me, but I also like that the characters in Antares are not these like heroic scaled individuals that are like, you can shoot the commander 5 times as opposed to a regular trooper, or all these things. And so it's like
Hammer.
It literally it's Antares is Warcraft 2 as opposed to Warcraft 3, and I love that.
That's absolutely true.
You know what I mean? Because you don't have an army centric around an individual. Like Star Wars Legion, great game. Not quite sure why Princess Leia can take 5 laser beams as opposed to 1. But like it's really neat because it's like, I don't know, it makes the narrative even more fun because it's like I've had many times where I'm like, my forces are being led by Commander Sojun, and it's like turn 2, and it's like Commander Shozun has been cut down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, don't get too attached to your leaders and heroes because they will die.
Yeah.
Especially if they roll a 1. If you roll a 1, oh.
I think that's neat.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, let's get
in that.
Go ahead.
Game starts creating a narrative all on its own. You've now got a commander who has been patched up so many times.
Yeah, Sojun looks like Swiss cheese at this point.
Well, it gives us stuff like Terrence. Like you literally.
You mean Clarence? Don't you disrespect Clarence's name? You put respect on his name.
But like, it's so cool because like sometimes your commander will take a plasma cannon and get vaporized, but then the squad leader from your other strike troop does amazing. And then like Tim said, it almost creates this narrative where it's like, ooh, well, I'm glad that guy picked up the baton and went with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that. I'm hoping we're going to continue with the narrative campaigns.
That would be amazing
as we go on, especially the narrative campaign supplements. I'd like to see more. Obviously, all our games days are geared around narrative campaigns as well. So as Ghost of Yuham Nu last year,
which was awesome.
Which was thanks. Which people really liked because it's not just straightforward, and you're trying to chase after these artifacts, and the comes back to, do we shoot them before they run away? In fact, we don't have a choice. We've got to just shoot them. But actually, there's an artifact over here which I'll pick up. Yeah, but if he picks that one up, he's taking it off, and that's winning the game. And there's a split. You think, well, I could go for that one, but if I don't shoot him, he's gonna, and that's really what helps bring the game alive. And you have to approach Antares, I think, appreciating that that's the element of it. I've had people who have just had a few head-to-head games, and I think they've sometimes wondered what the magic is, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost always solved by, we'll go out and actually try the narrative game, exactly as not Jay said. That's what it's built for.
Just to add a soulless power gaming point to that one. The fact that all of the tournaments for competitive players are based around non-match scenarios, like you're never going to get just to kill each other scenario in an Antares tournament, is a very interesting list building.
Oh yeah.
The meta is borderline. Their borderline is no meta list because the tournament changes so drastically every time that whatever meta list you made for the last tournament is not going to work for the new one. So you have to constantly evolve, as opposed to in other games where tournaments are very, very cut and dry, and you're going to see list after list after list that's the same. In this one, that does not work, and it's really a pleasure as someone who likes building lists.
Because with that, it kind of will put people on, somewhat of an even ground from someone that's like me and Sergey that have played 1 million games to someone who hasn't played that many. Because when you show up and it's like, yeah, exactly. And it's like your opponent's like, I'm going to drive my transport straight into your army and use it to block your line of sight. You're just like, what? But
yeah, I'm a bastard.
To react, it's like there's so many different options. There's so many different ways to play. And you're going for every single piece, and you got a guard enemy, and he's like, you know what? I don't need artifacts. I'm just gonna murder you. You might have that, or you might have a freeborn player who's just like, I'm gonna get in there quick, and you're not even gonna know what's going on by the time I win.
Not Jay. The fact that actually in some scenarios, especially in the campaign ones we run, some of the win conditions for different factions are different for different factions.
No two armies is the same.
Exactly, because like even the Gar, which are like that cudgel of an army. There's so many different ways to play them. But it's like because like you could literally show up and it's like, oh, you're the Gar. How many battle suits do you got? And they're like, I don't have any battle suits. It's all outcasts.
Yep.
I mean, I guess you have 3. You have 3 battle suits no matter what. You're required.
I got 3 large groups of outcasts just for that reason, Kevin. So you've revealed my evil plan to not Jay.
Yeah.
It was
You'll be fine.
I'm swimming in outcasts. Make it rain, outcasts.
It was so funny when my strike troop
15 outcasts.
Yeah. But when they were being outclassed, my strike troops by outcasts, it's like you're just like outcast, and you're like, oh my god, they have so many bullets.
Exactly. Yeah, you're like, I advance and shoot you 30 times.
I think that will give the beginners an idea that Antares can be both narrative and a bit competitive. All in one.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're looking for a game that is like that, I mean, this first half an hour that we've been talking, that was kind of like our birth, and that's where we came from and what we found out and discovered, and that you can discover yourself as a beginner. We have a few things in the chat here, but what I'd love to do is talk about how to get started in each army. What would be maybe a good, you know, quick 5, maybe not even 500, just a good start. I mean, points doesn't really matter, or does it can. I know, like with the starter box with the Gar, that was good points just to start.
That's a great starter box
with the battle suits. And I was looking at it going, now how is this going to be a balanced army against all these strike guys? I'm gonna slaughter this kid. You know, I'm gonna win this game. And I went up against him, and my son did not lose a single one.
Yep.
And I lost half.
Hard to kill.
It's quite interesting. People have criticised Xalos Horizon for not having some decent balanced armies, because actually you find that for the first 5 games, the Gar win hands down all the time, which is great if you're playing with a son, because or a child or a daughter, or whatever. My daughter is done gaming, so you give them the Gar, and they just say, "Oh, what have I got?" And you say, "Well, they're cool models, aren't they?" I say, "Yes." What can they do? And I said, "Try it." And they just see squads melt away before them. But I think the only reason those 2 got into the Xalos Horizon was because they were the only ones actually ready by the time Xalos Horizon had to be launched, and they just thought the Gar suits looked so cool they had to be in there. And in some ways, the Gar are now, if you like, they epitomise Antares, the difference in Antares, I think. But it's one of the key things I probably have to say before we go forward. Sorry, you were talking about Ruben's message. If we can come back to that, is that
that's fine.
People know that Antares 2 is coming on. We may have people who are watching this who are thinking, well, there's another edition. Everything I get will be gone, and it's not. Antares 2 just takes what is the essential for each army and boils it out and actually strengthens it. So if you've got strike troopers, if you've got drones in a Concord army, you will still have that in A2. If you've got loads of AI squads, if you've got a few assault squads, if you've got a few infiltrators, you'll still have that in A2 as well, and it will still go really quite well. Same with Boromites. If you've got a proper Boromite army, which actually plays to narratively what the Boromites are, so in other words, you've got loads of lava mites, you've got some work gangs, and you've just got a few other support things, then it will still work in A2, and you'll find that if you're actually using an army which plays to the faction strengths, it will do better in A2. Sorry, I interrupted there because you're just about to talk about Ruben's comment there.
That's totally fine. I forgot to mention the comments. That's
we got too into it.
I was like,
they're running rampant over here.
Yes, they are. Ruben said, "I got a printed beta rule book sent to Spain, and we tried the game with Warhammer minis." Oh, how dare you! We were playing in the shop and realized it was so cool that was pre-starter boxes. I remember hearing about the game at the Beyond the Gates of Antares. First tried to launch it with that ambitious Kickstarter, which was canned before completion. Hansa Nairobi. I'm saying that right? Yeah, was the first model presented. Now, as people know, I have a pronunciation problem. I guess you can call it. So
No.
if I butcher names, I apologize. That was my Hans.
Hans?
That was my Hans Nairobi. You know, that's what I called it.
Hans Nairobi.
Hans Nairobi, but it's not that. And Tim knows I struggled when I was doing my build videos on pronunciations with a few things. So we worked on that. We're better now, but
It doesn't actually matter. I'm sure somebody on One World or another has got an accent or a dialect which totally mangles everything we say. And if we appeared on it, they'd tell us we're all wrong.
Yep.
Exactly. That's just from that planet.
Hans Nairobi is what I called it. Didn't think about the game then much, even when it launched, because Concord didn't appeal to me much and still doesn't. Oh, no, that's sad. Bought the Isaurian Phalanx Troopers years later because they looked somewhat unique. They did, yes. And later decided to complete the collection, but Car 9 to get the rules and templates and led to branching to Algren, the classic story. Still have some work to do to revitalize the game, I guess. And
it's good as looking at it that way, though. I'm really chuffed to hear that.
Morning, Jason Hall says.
What's up, Jason?
In our club, Warlords sent us a demo set years ago, which were painted but then largely forgotten to the shelf. Maybe after club reopens after the plague is over.
Yeah.
And I love Antares because it is highly strategic. Not just two armies clashing in the center of the board. I believe in a range of available reactions play an important role in that. And that is the comment I wanted to get to, because that is what appealed to me. The fact that it's not a let's meet in the middle and have blood out.
It was so weird because there were so many war games that felt like no matter what you were playing, it was black powder. Because it's like, now it's my turn. And it's like, everybody line up. Aim. Fire.
Yep.
It's like, Kevin, it's your turn. And it's like, half my army is dead. And it's like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry. That's how this game works.
They have a board alley in the middle somewhere. Yeah. There's one part in the board where it's just all, you know.
And the objective marker for this scenario is the center. And you're like, okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and both armies are going after the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially in science fiction, you know, what one race of individuals is going to be looking for is not necessarily going to be the same thing everybody, because I can, even without knowing the history and the background and the backstory, because, and I say it that way because I despise the term fluff.
But it's so fluffy.
Though. Oh, James. He's the man with bunny rabbits. He would know fluff.
Fluff is what you get out of the Kraft marshmallow jar.
And do you not enjoy that?
Oh, it's great. But as someone who loves history, I don't want people to call World War II the fluff of the American Army.
That's a relatively fair point.
So, without knowing the background and the backstory of all the different races, I will guarantee you when the Algren meet up with Freeborn, they're not after the same thing. You know, to an extent, they may both want this particular patch of land because of resources, but they want the resources for completely different things. So they might not even be looking at the same resources. The Algren want the pretty little blue crystals that provide them with, you know, some sort of power dispersion, and the Freeborn want the sand to make silicate to make really cool glass.
Huh?
Space bucks.
Space bucks. It's all about the space buck.
Yeah, like the Bormites taco stand. They need materials to
Freeborn
build
are
that.
likely to want the same land. Actually, the point there really is what we're saying is the Freeborn would actually just want the land so they can then sell it off to a higher bidder than the Alderman.
Yeah, there you go.
Condominiums, as far as the eye can see.
Bormites, and if they don't get a high bidder, everybody knows that they just pull in the Bormites to come and mine for them, and it's just the way it is. I'd put the fluff of the US Army in my new series.
Damn it, Todd!
All right, so let's get into this. Let's talk about this. So let's say we're gonna do Concord, okay, and Gar, and honestly, a good starting force, starter box, Xylos Horizon,
obviously,
is a great start.
I will say, playing as many games as we have, I would say for anybody new getting into the game, obviously 500-point army, the smallest army, is a good place to start. But if you're someone who's like, and if you want someone, or if you're someone who wants a little more variety, I would say 750 is a great, point list to aim for, because you're going to have variety, you're going to have the core, and the games are still about 45 minutes to an hour.
And the models cost way less than a Volkswagen.
Yes.
Yes.
Before we, because this is for beginners,
Yes.
I just want to talk about the concept of order dice and break values real quick.
Absolutely.
Because break values are something that I didn't understand when I first started playing, because I just didn't read the damn rule.
Now pay attention, Mache.
Yeah, so in Antares, every unit that you add to your list adds an order dice to your army. Those order dice represent activations, and your army is activated at random. When you pull an order dice from the bag, you get to assign it to a unit. A break value refers to half of your army, rounded up, yes. So in a lot of situations, the end of the game happens when somebody has reached their break value, i.e. lost a number of order dice equal to half of their army rounded up. So when you're building lists, you want to keep that break value in mind, which will be a little bit different than some other games that don't have that concept, because sometimes you will want to spend 20 points on a little unit just to get your break value from 4 to 5, so it's then rounded up. Because that's just a concept that you'll have to get your mind wrapped around when you're building lists in Antares.
And to continue with that, a lot of the scenarios, narrative and matched, also have different rules as far as how your army is deployed. And that is usually also based on the order dice. So if it's half your army rounded up needs to be on the field and the other half shows up, once again, you can kind of, you don't want to necessarily screw yourself out of, having more troops on the field, so to speak.
Exactly. Odd numbers are usually good as far as order dice counts.
Yeah. Well, another thing too is certain armies play better to new beginners. Certain factions play better to, I wouldn't recommend somebody starting off with Virai or Isaurians.
Not Virai, for sure.
And Isaurians for sure, to be honest as well. I think you're absolutely right. If Isaurians in the hands of a skilled player, and I'm looking at you, Rick Baker, if you watch this video, they can be absolutely devastating, but they do need a skilled player because they need a little bit of finesse as to how they run. And
Lady Luck.
Or luck, yeah. They do look cool, especially that warped X howitzer, which not Jay's got. It's just some great stuff in there, but they need, for a beginner, they're not a good beginner army. Virai are also not that good beginner's army, because you need to have some idea of the rules, and again, you need to be able to actually support units with others in the Virai, with the command units, and you have to learn how to do that. And if you're not a wargamer who's into that, it's just not there. The other things are, people say the Gar aren't a really good start army. I don't know. If you can get your head around the fact that they break every rule in the book, then it's okay, because they're a good army to give sort of like a young kid, and they just says, what do I get? Well, you get these cool models. But I've only got 6. And you can just say, well, but look what they can do. And as I said, so from that perspective, they're a great set of models to give kids, and even actually to give them just on the sprues and say, put these together and see what they do, because they're just such lovely, absolutely lovely models. They're genius. I really love them. Which leaves us with 4 real other armies. You've got then the Algarian, the Boromite, the Freeborn, and of course the Concord. The thing is, they've all got different strengths. The Boromite are really close in. If you've got somebody who wants to go in and just beat people up, then give them a Boromite army. The trick is in Antares is to be able to get in the first place. If you want an army who can have almost anything you might possibly want and more, and you want a few elite units and a few not so elite units, then maybe you go for the Freeborn. Which leaves really the Algarian and the Concord. Now the Concord are actually much more of a ranged army. So if you like ranged armies, go for the Concord, and you can do really well with just strike squads. If you want to put a Kratz in there, you can do a couple of D1 drones, and then if you wanted to, maybe a D2 drone or one of the bigger drones or transport or whatever. But they are ranged, and if you don't mind being at range and knowing that if you're having to go for a particular point objective, then they might suffer a little bit at the hands of some of the others. But you like shooting people up, then go for the Concord. Which leaves finally the Algarian, who are, they're 2 things. One is they're a wargamers army. So if you're classic old school wargamer, the Algarian don't really have any particular strengths, except for the fact that they can do everything. And that's what makes them a really useful army. So the AI squad is actually not too bad at hand-to-hand. They're fairly tough. They've actually got some decent ranged capabilities. They've got X launchers in the squad as well, overhead micro X's, overhead stuff. And the army's actually got things like assault squads, who are one of the most deadly assault units in the field. So you can shove one of those in, and they've got infiltrators, who, if you want to be a little bit sneaky, are sneaky. They can get ahead and lay a minefield if you like, or they've got camo drones. They can go up to somebody, act as forward obs, and then just go down and behind that camo drone. Then they're backed up by some speedy things. They're backed up by some really solid tanks. So overall, if you just want to play around and sort them out, then and just see how it goes, then perhaps the Algarian's a good way to go. But to be really, really, really capable, you've got to be able to actually combine the whole things in the Algarian. So you've got a player like Matt Cross down Southampton, who always comes out with an army which, to anybody who's looking at it, just thinks, what on earth is that? He's got a hazard suit, he's got a mag mortar or something like that, and then he's got an assault squad and a couple of AI squads, and you might have a fast unit over on one side, one of the speeders, the skimmers. It looks like a hodgepodge, but he is really, really good at running combined arms together and using the strengths of everything in his army. So from a wargamer's wargamer perspective, the Algarian is really good. From a beginner's perspective, perhaps the Algarian is more forgiving than the others because they don't have those weaknesses. I mean, is that reasonable?
Yeah, I feel like as far as like low skill gap, and I say low skill gap, but also like all of the armies like take a long time to like master and play really well. Concord and Algarian are probably 2 really good armies to start with.
Freeborn too, really. They're
Freeborn too. Yep.
That, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would also say Gar only slightly more difficult, but I really, really like the starter set that has Gar and Concord in it, because it teaches you quickly how to deal with Gar as an element. Because you're right, most of the time when people play that starter box, the Gar win 1, 2, 3, 4 games, and then all of a sudden the Concord learn that they can split fire, and that split fire ruins Gar. And it's a good way to teach yourself how to deal with all of the kind of disparate threats in Antares.
Yeah. And I would say that on that note too, it's like if you're a new player getting into it, I would just sit down with the rule book and at least look up all the different things you find with the units that are provided in those. Because it's really easy for Gar players right in the beginning to get 2 order decks if they have a plasma man, or that sling net ammo doesn't work on them, and things like that are just like the subtle little details that can kind of, because you hear that a lot on the MTELs, folks being like, I love using sling net against Gar, and you're like, it doesn't work on Gar, and they're like, damn it. Because then their Gar buddy's like, you're screwed.
I can win a game again.
Yeah. It's like that back and forth. Like the moment I was like, oh my God, I can split fire. And Sergey's like, and like loses so hard. And then like the next person who reads the next rule. But yeah, no, Sergey's right. Oh, go on with the comment.
No, that's fine. I was just Todd. He's a friend of the show, and he's been listening to these. And don't worry, he won't get into it. He'll come over and play it, but he won't, get into it. He actually did he beat you, or did you beat him when you?
I beat him thoroughly.
And what was he playing?
Dead.
You were Concord. I think he was Freeborn. But anyway,
smoking craters.
He says, "Whoa, break value. Mini games have something like this, which is cool. I didn't realize that this had that. Cool. Is there a test when you reach a break point, so maybe you can keep going?"
So it essentially starts a timer. Once you break, you roll to see if another turn will be played. If I think it's just a 50-50. If there is another turn, then after that turn ends, the game ends. If there's not another turn, the game ends at the end of the turn where you were broken.
Yeah, fundamentally what Sergey's saying is it's scenario specific. So sometimes being broken, if you're playing a scenario where it's your objective to retreat off as many units as you can off the table, if you're broken, you don't care because you're still going backwards. Yeah. So it really is dependent on what the scenario actually says at any point in time. Sometimes it's a case that the scenario completely ignores breakpoints. It's about, say, for example, retrieve an artifact. And if you retrieve all the artifacts and your opponent, if you retrieve all 3 artifacts, it doesn't matter what state the rest of your forces are or your opponent is, apart from the troops itself, of course. But that's it. You've achieved the objective of the whole game. So you pull those artifacts back. So if your guys are broken, you can give them a hug, give them a cuddle, send them to sick bay, give them a little bit of R&R. And
an inspirational Kevin dropkick speech.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't see my foot, but it hit the ceiling.
So we talked about Algorand. So it's you can actually have some fun with Algorand with just a few AI squads, which I think will now only actually do the plastic form mainly, but that's fine. The plastic's actually really good. Perhaps an assault squad, if you like to have them in infiltrators, but a lot of people don't, pull in perhaps a few of the skimmers. And then the other side of it, which is the other forgiving newcomer, and we can actually answer Mini Walmart's question here as well. The core of a Concord army, which is the other forgiving one we were discussing, is the strike squad. And one of the key things is actually in the books as an option, but actually I don't know any veteran player who ever plays without it, is upgrading one of the troopers to carry a rather than a plasma carbine, he actually carries a plasma
lance.
Mental block. Plasma lance. Now that plasma lance is a sort of like an anti-tank rifle, really, in some ways, I suppose you could say, because it can actually take out some of the tanks in the game, and it's quite useful for that.
I always have a plasma lance.
It's so cheap and so good.
Also, they go with a spotter, because the plasma lance is a little bit inaccurate, which you might expect for something that's so big and bulky, and produces so much firepower. So the best layout for an AI squad is to have the commander as normal. It's always good to give him sling net, because sling net is fantastic in giving out pins, not against Gar. Then you have 3 troopers who have just got their plasma carbines, and then the last trooper always upgrade with a plasma lance, and then you always give a spotter to the squad, which gives what I always call the base points cost of a Concord strike squad is 125 points, which is nice and easy to remember. And there you go. Now, the plasma lance, the other really, really useful about that is as soon as you give that plasma lance to that squad, it's not just you know, a 15-point buff, I think, over the normal 110 together. Instantly almost double the effect of the squad, because the other core thing about Antares, the core mechanic is pins. And basically, you want to try and put down as many pins as your opponent as possible, because pins start wearing them down and they break their morale. So what you can do with the plasma lance is actually shoot at a different target than the rest of your squad is shooting. Normally, everybody in the squad has to shoot at the same target. Basically, it's the commander saying, "Shoot at them over there." No, them over there. And the plasma lance guy just says, "All right, you shoot at those. There's a vehicle over here. I'm going to shoot at that." And that's what split fire is. It's simply that the plasma lance can actually shoot at a different target to the rest of the squad. Now, why is that so fantastic? Well, firstly, you're hitting two targets. But secondly, if you hit with both shots, you are now laying down a pin on two enemy units. And as we just said, pins are really vital. As you get more and more pins, when you reach as many pins as your unit's command value, the unit goes. It doesn't matter what else, it's broken, it is just so badly beaten up, it's so demoralized that it just runs away. So that's one factor. So if you've got then two strike squads, each shooting at two enemy squads, every time they shoot, the strike squads can put down a pin on their enemy units. So that means gradually the pins start mounting up on your enemy faster at twice the rate as their shots against you. So,
and that's good, because Concord are so specialized that you usually have less infantry, so it's a really nice, you know, patch to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what really makes the strike. That's what really is the added bonus. It's the USP of the strike squad, and it's a properly configured strike squad, and it's excellent.
Now, I think it's also important to note that is generally speaking the strike troops, and also the Isaurian phase squad operates the exact same way because of the same loadout. But anybody who has a vehicle with multiple weapons, if you're doing an advanced order, all of a vehicle's weapons need to be aimed at the same target. But if you stay put and do a fire order, which represents more of like a precise, accurate attack, you can actually target different units with each weapon. So if you have a tank in a good position, you can fire. Or the most nightmarish situation, if you have a brood mother festooned with literally, Sergey,
it's good stuff.
All of a sudden you're putting pins across like the whole enemy army, and it's terrifying, but it's really cool. And it just highlights another aspect of the strategy behind it. Just so much richer than a lot of other game systems.
And that's what the split fire is. You're starting to lay pins down. And the good thing about the strike squad is you can take a spotter buddy with it, and because that allows you to re-roll. If you miss with the lance, you can then re-roll, and you stand a pretty good chance of actually hitting. But if you hit with the lance, you then can just spend it on whatever else you like. So that's really good. Now, the other good thing as well is that if you give the leader, the squad leader, a sling net, and he may have to shoot at the same thing as the rest of his squad, but if he shoots a sling net at it, he is then adding a pin. So that the rest of his squad is shooting, maybe causing significant damage, and then he's adding a pin to it as well at the same time, which means you're now laying down 3 pins a turn on 2 different units,
which is wildly good.
Which is really, really good compared with everybody else's 1. Last Dakodo is talking about infiltrators. I love infiltrators. I think they're really good. They're one of the first Algerian units I got after the AI squad, and I just love the way that they can just like run up to an enemy, shoot, and then the enemy starts saying, "What I'm going to do with you now?" And they can just dive down into the underbrush. Up comes a cano drone, and they can just, "He can't see us now." At which point, the whole thing about it is that your opponent then has to deal with it, and that's one of the things, the great curves to a newcomer to the game, is that learning that every single unit has to be dealt with in a different way, and every single army fights in a different way.
Yes.
You can't use AI algorithm tactics with a Concord army because you'll lose.
Yeah.
Which is really difficult because I often forget which army I'm using. Why has my strike squad just got wiped out? Because we've been into those Boromites. Oh yeah.
So if you wanted to get started, say with a freeborn army, where would be your starting point? Of course, you have the regular troops, right? But which troops do you choose? Do you choose Denari, or do you choose Vardnari, or what? See, I'm screwing up words.
Let me help you out. No, I guess the overarching point I would first make is that every army in Antares, no matter what faction you want, they have a pretty sweet starter box. No matter what, there's just a lot of really cool starter boxes, and so, like you just butchered. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, that's okay. That's fair. That's fair. I'll take that. Yes.
One of my favorite factions. I think Tim would agree. Yeah, amen. They have 3 different grades of troops. They have ferals, which represent a vast myriad of individuals from systems that are lower tech than the Antares like baseline, that are the cheapest. You have the Damari house troopers, which are kind of a levied military force that like the basic line. That's more like, and then you have the Martinari that are more elite, and so you can have those. I would probably suggest going for the cheaper ones. I don't know. What do you think, Tim?
I always go with Bardanari for a start because they're cheap, they're easily painted, which is always a good thing, and actually there's a fair few of them in the squad, so they can take a few hits, even though they are not as effective as, say, the Vardanari. So they're always a good core to have because you can send them off. If you have to send them off somewhere and you lose them, you just tend to think, well, they're just Damari, They're a spaceship crew, which somebody said, right, we've got to go down to the surface of this planet. We've got to sort this out. They are the red shirts of Antares.
Okay, draw straws.
So yeah, I'm so tempted to paint up all my
that'd be so fun.
in red shirts with black trousers and then just say, aha, you killed them. Well, don't care. They expected to. Just wait for next episode and then we'll have some more.
That's fantastic. But they got like a roulette system. It's like, and leading the squad will be Bill from accounting. Bill's like, I'm sorry, what?
That's always nice. But I always then, on top of those, I like to have a unit of Vardanari simply because I want somebody who I can rely on, because the Vardanari have got pretty good armor. They have got plasma carbines, which are probably the most useful hand weapons in Antares. They've got reasonably good strike value when they're shooting on their own, but they can also be put onto auto mode where they do 2 shots at strike value 0. The Vardanari can be upgraded with a few other buddy drones, and that's one of the things I think newcomers have to Antares. Buddy drones and probes are key elements of a force. The buddy drones are key elements of your individual squads, and probes produce force multipliers for the whole of the rest of the army, full stop. So that's something I think that it's an important thing to pick up from. So I always like taking Vardanar, and then the rest of it is actually down to how I really feel on the day, not what's this scenario going to be like, but it does come down to how I feel on the day. So I like running sometimes an elite freeborn command squad, because the freeborn are the traders of Antares. The command squad is obviously the captain or whatever, and he sorry, I've got a Star Trek a couple of episodes going through my mind at the moment, where you had the trader who they kept on coming across, who used to trade in almost anything, the merchant. But yeah, the elite freeborn commanders is they've got so much money that you can see them giving their bodyguards the best armor and the best weapons they can buy. They can buy every single buddy drone in the book almost. and just give it to that squad. And that can be really useful, because if you've got a batter drone around that and a shield drone and a medi drone, medi buddy on there as well, so everybody within 5 inches gets a reroll, they suddenly become a unit which the enemy has to, or your opponent really has to think about. Yes, they're expensive when you ramp them up like that, but they're still a sort of unit which your opponent thinks, oh, I can't ignore them. So they've got to be addressed like that. So I like doing that. But the other thing, which I think is always useful to take, is a couple of squads of ferals, because they are cheap. If you get them ramped up to Somographs, we've had to fix Somographs was too cheap, but we're looking at that, and they've been upgraded in various points fixes. But the Somographs mean that they just go haywire. Basically, they can't really be controlled. They pass almost all the command tests, not quite all of them. And if they do go haywire because the Semograph malfunctions, you roll the order dice and you have to do whatever it says on the order dice. That's actually really good fun, because you've got this feral unit who you're charging forward. Yes, they're going to go up and they're going to grab the artifact, and suddenly unit suddenly goes haywire, and the next point they're going to go down and have a cup of tea.
Blue screen, they're like,
yeah. Sort of, no, I don't want you to do that. So I've had loads of fun, but most of the time you can actually do a lot with Semografted units. In fact, that's about the only order you can't do anything with them for. So that's great. And then I like the striker. So really, it's Damari. If you want to go with a nice high-tech squad and put the command squad in, otherwise put in a couple of ferals, then the Vardanari, and then I love the strikers. They are a really nice unit. You can put, basically it's like an armored car, I suppose, in other games, and you can put a whole load of different loadouts on that, and it's pretty fast, and it can be really lethal, or it can lay down a lot of support fire. And the other thing which I'd say is always make sure you've actually got a couple of units of probes. Sergey and Kevin right at the start said, put in extra order dice. Probes are cheap. Yes, they can be knocked off the edge, but if you've got a unit of scout probes on, you can use them as spotters for your overhead fire. You can also use them to seek out enemy snipers or infiltrators, which we've said are so good. And they're really good at that, and they can do other things as well. Targeters are one of the most hated units in any force. We'll come back to Tetris later, but targeters can just swamp a enemy squad or vehicle and just say, "It's here." Yeah, look. Right. At which point, almost everybody gets a bonus when actually shooting at that squad. So they're really useful.
You mentioned buddy drones a lot, and buddy drones are these little bitty drones that assist the characters and give them buffs and debuffs and a line of sight when you don't have line of sight. Especially with your mortars, or your howitzers. You can't see them. Oh wait, no. Hey, can you see him? Yeah, he's right here. Like you said.
They're the spotters and the forward observers of Antares.
Yes.
Yeah. Some people sometimes say, "Oh, well, where's my forward obs guy for my artillery?" And it's sort of, actually, you don't need one of them in this unit.
Name are B14 through B16.
Okay.
And
many do you want?
To clarify for anybody who's truly a new player too, is that many other war games organize every unit into types. And in Antares, you have tactical choices, which are going to represent the breadth of your normal troops. You're going to have support choices, which makes up support teams, light vehicles, transports, many different things for each army. The strategic choices are when you're getting into heavy specialized weapon teams, howitzers, plasma bombards, and then that's where your vehicles are going to live as well. And then that last choice, which we're referring to, the little buddy drones and things like that, are auxiliary. Now, the different armies do get varied with their different auxiliary choices. Freeborn have failed science projects in the form of misgenic rejects. The coolest one. But that's how they kind of organize it. and to kind of put a bow on the Freeborn, their starter set is actually very good. You get 2 Damari squads that can also be very easily converted into ferals. You do get a command squad, which kind of it features a little bit of Vardnari bodyguards. You get some targeter probes for an auxiliary choice. You get a weapons team and a transport. So if you were starting off with the Freeborn, you could literally start with that. Maybe add a Vardnari squad like Tim suggested, and you would have a pretty viable force all the way up until 750 points.
It's actually a really, really useful starter box.
Oh, yeah. It actually contains the 3 strategic choices you need for a 500-point army. You get 2 support choices you could choose from if you wanted to bring those, and then it ties it off with 1 auxiliary choice, which is great. So the Reborn starter set, like you said, is actually really nice because it has what you need.
Yeah, and that's really worth starting with that. And in fact, you can actually use it for a whole load of other things. If, as not Jay said earlier, you decide you don't want to use the list. So this is, I mean, frankly, Freeborn are going to cobble together anybody they can get, and just say, okay, right, we've got somebody who's taking out our crops of fava beans. So I don't know where that came from. Don't ask.
Curiosity as well.
So they're more likely to just say, well, who have we got to hand? You know, it's the trouble is that it depends on who was last doing the accounting for them. So they're either going to have some good troops, a few good troops in a particular area, or they're just going to have to then, as you said, just pull out Bob from accounting.
Yeah, he was there until that horrible incident on Seraphon 7.
Oh, right, okay. Who did we promote in his place?
So let me ask the Virai expert, Mr. Sergey.
Okay.
Let's say there's an ambitious beginner.
A very ambitious beginner.
I love the Virai.
Yeah.
Where would they start? Where would you think the wheelhouse for that would be?
It's weird with Virai because you can play them in a lot of different ways, and all of those ways are very different and quite effective. I would say if you're starting off at 500 points, you're probably going to want to stick to a tertiary supervisor, just because that's kind of what the points allow at 500 points. The secondary supervisor is very, very effective, but very expensive. And you might not have the points to fit him in there. So you have to have the 1 tertiary supervisor. You have to have some constructors. And this is where, and again, there's not a good, I can't give you a prescription for Virai because they're all over the place. There's a lot to do with them.
Well, maybe just what should they try first?
Yeah.
You know?
So you have a requirement that a fourth of your army, I think it's a fourth of your army, has to be constructors. Yeah. A thing to note is that you can either use the tactical constructor choice, which would be constructors or mining teams, which are both kind of like crappy but really, really, really cheap units, or your weapons teams count as constructors, which is another interesting way to fill that slot, which is actually even cheaper. And those teams have what's called fractal weapons. And fractal weapons, once they hit somebody, they lock onto their target and increase their strike value when subsequently shooting at that target before they've moved. And this is where you get into some of like the kind of tricky, icky, fun stuff you can do with the Virai, because they have, a special rule called reprogram, which is a rule that all of their architecture units, which is what your tertiary supervisor will have. And this might be a little advanced for a beginner video, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because it's fun. You can use reprogram to either remove pins from units around your supervisor, or you can give order dice back to units that have already gone. And when you have a fractal weapon, you can shoot somebody, hit them, establishing your fractal lock, then give that dice back to that unit, shooting at them again with increased strike value and auto hitting, and then get the order dice, the first order dice, hopefully the next turn, and shoot them again, auto hitting and increasing your strike value once again. So you can build up these kind of fun combo plays. Yeah, I never get it to work. I always fail in the middle.
It's because I know what you're doing and I prevent it.
Yeah.
The strike value, what he's speaking of, it takes away from, it's kind of like the armor save that it takes away from. So if it's a resilience of 7, that strike value increases from. If it's a 2, then that 7 becomes a 5, and you have to roll lower than a 5. And if you have the fractal lock, it'll be a 3,
getting more stronger and stronger.
It'll be harder and harder increasingly for you to hit that unit. I just wanted to point that out, sir.
Yeah.
It's the armor penetration value. So the high strike value means it will penetrate armor more easily.
So that's where you kind of have. So that's your constructor choices. Those are the things you have to have in the army at 500 points in order for it to be a legal army. Then you kind of have a bit of a branching path. You can either kind of go a ranged variant of the Virai and get a couple support drones, or you can go a more melee-oriented variant of the Virai, which is probably more popular and more effective, I would guess. I haven't played 1,000 games of the Virai, but and you can get some warriors and a light support vehicle. There is no model for the light support vehicle, so you'll have to do a conversion on that. But their warriors are very, very, very strong melee units.
Rip claws they're armed with,
yeah, they have rip claws. They can take out vehicles because all of their stuff compounds like a grenade. So if you hit one thing multiple times with their rip claws, they'll increase in strike value and make one big hit instead of many little hits. And yeah, that's kind of your choice. You either want to really get in people's faces using like a light vehicle to sprint across the field and getting into people's backlines, at which point you will shred them. Unless you're going up against lava mites, not much can really. Lava mites are maybe Algorand assault squads. Not much can stand up to you.
Yeah.
And you can move faster than everyone else because you can reprogram. So you can sprint, reprogram, sprint again. You have a 30-inch charge radius. And again, all of this is like super not beginner stuff, but the Virai's baseline is not beginner.
The most important thing about Sergei's articulations is that it's, the Virai, upon viewing them, there could be a predilection with a lot of new people to just load the field with constructors and all that stuff and just charge forward. But like in all armies in Antares, there's just more subtleties involved because you have to have these complicated. With the Virai, it's a 1-2 punch. You have to have some ranged element providing cover and pins for that forward moving element, because we found out really quick you can't just, not the Tyrannid, you can't just take a bunch of drones and run them forward, because
that way lies failure.
Yeah, like your people don't have chainsaws on the other end. They have laser guns and plasma weapons and dog rifles.
They get to you, yes.
Yeah, so it's like you will be shot to pieces if you try doing that. But that's where it's like the Virai, it's like, yeah, it might be hard for a new player, but if you're a new player that loves complex strategies and the elements, you'll love the Virai because it's just this really interesting 1-2 punch combo that you create.
Yeah, you have to shoot then punch. Yeah.
It's like unfolding.
Something there that I think is probably really, really important to reiterate. In fact, actually, I see in one of the comments, Dave Blue Team's pulled it up as well. But that's something which is actually really important, and that's the word cover. Antares needs a lot more terrain that you'd normally be used to. Really, you need loads of scenery, as Dave Blue Team stated. You need lots of cover, loads of different bits around the table. The standard is about 12 decent sized bits for a 6x4 table, but that actually does mean decent sized bits. So it means a length of linear obstacles 8 inches long. It means if you've only got a 4x4 bit, then actually you ought to put another couple of bits of terrain on to make up a single coherent terrain lump, if you like, or even if it's spread around. Because just like in real life, if you don't have cover, if you just go charging across the empty step, your opponent's just going to think, what are you doing?
Right? Yeah. And it's the trick, because it's not one of those games where you're just lining up on either side and shooting the crap out of each other. Like, you do have people move around. I mean, you don't know who's going next. So it's like, and that's why I love it. It's very rooted in realism in the sense that there is cover and there is concealment. And it is incredibly important that you utilize both.
Yes, particularly for Virai, because again, they have to get across the field and they don't have great armor saves. So if you're not, you gotta weave and bob with the Virai. You can't you're not a cudgel army. You're a surgical strike army.
Definitely some sort of fire support for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of fire support for the Virai, they actually have the best targeted probes in the game. Yeah. So
I set it up. There you go.
Yep. So SDAA probes are like a targeter probe, where they a normal targeter probe, I should explain first, attaches to a unit, and you get +1 accuracy for shooting that unit when they're attached. SDAA probes don't need to attach to a unit. They shoot out a laser beam, kind of like a Tau marker light. And that makes your crappy shooting all of a sudden pretty good shooting. Yeah. So it allows you to set up the 1-2 punch, like Kevin was saying. You marker light or you targeter probe something. That gives you the accuracy to put a pin or two on them. And then if you then charge them when there's a pin or two on them, the unit will fall almost 100% of the time. So it's about layers.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is that layer that's important. And the star probes are really useful. The so much so that, like Tetris, and we can come on to Gar later, I suppose, but like Tetris, people have taken to shoot them off the table because they're that useful.
Yes.
But if you don't use them properly, they're just absolutely useless. You have to use them for that 1-2 punch. Yeah.
And then just for people who are like looking to collect Virai, because we've talked about all the units, Virai are one of the factions. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have a condensed starter box, but you can get literally a starting army. I believe it has like a first instance, a second instance, which are like the big commanders. I think I have a tertiary supervisor as well. Or tertiary instance, and then it has like a weapon drone, a few constructor squads, and all that stuff. So it does have a good base, but it's going to give you a good base for getting into the larger point value armies, as opposed to a lot of the other ones, which gets you in that good 500 to 750 point range. The Virai starting our army probably would get you into the 1,000 points pretty easily.
Yeah, I like their mining. I forget what it's called. It's like a mining support box too. It's got a couple weapons teams and a mining team or two in there. It's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. I think that box you're talking about has got a first, second, and a tertiary. It's got Hive Defender Squad. It's got an assault squad, assault warrior squad, weapon drone. It's got a bunch of constructor squads, scavenger, and whatever. The only thing you'd really need with it is possibly, mind you, that might be legal. You could possibly just put another constructor squad of some.
Yeah, 1 or 2 constructors. Yeah.
But that's actually a really. There's a lot of drones in there, but it's actually really quite fun. I've just looked it up now. I quite like the scavenger squad. As well, so.
To answer Ruben's question here, right quick, I would say Strike on Car 9 would be the best type of demo games. Now, if you want to play a larger battle, of course, just start with a pitched. Just one.
Actually, I'd like to say no for a demo game.
No, okay, great.
I appreciate you may have success on that, and so have I. The demo games that I've run, as where we've got loads of participation of people in, have always been a variation on one of the ones actually in the book, which is Capture the Drone. So you can have anything up to about 6 different people in the.
I forgot about that one.
In the game. Okay, fine. Yeah, you have 6 different people in the game, and if you've got loads of different armies, as I happen to have, you can give people different troops, and they all got something different, so they all start instantly buying into it, and that's a great way to get to know things. You can give someone sort of like 3 squads of outcasts for an outcast rebel army. You can, and everybody looks at them as if to say, "Well, why have you got more than me?" Once I've got 8 people, and all of a sudden they suddenly find out that actually outcasts aren't tough, but you've got to hide them behind stuff, and instantly they're learning bits of the game. They're learning some of the variety, and that sort of like Capture the Drone is really good. Basically, there's a drone in the middle of the table which has crashed, and you've got to get to it to carry it off the table so your technical teams can analyze it and see what it's got. And that's one of the good ones. And there's others as well, which I've had a big snow pyramid ones where, again, you have to go to the pyramid, grab some data and come off again if you can, or transmit it off. And those always work really well for demo games because you instantly get loads and loads of interaction. And people find quickly that if they do not cover their flanks properly with terrain, they're vulnerable. There's loads of, if you've got families involved or friends involved, you can ask them whether or not they get sat together, or if they want to be sat apart, and you'll find the ones who are sat together start squabbling amongst themselves a bit more, which is all very much fun. But and they just have a great time with it. If you just want a simple introduction one with anything else, then yeah, sure, go with exactly what Matt said. But
no, I agree with what you're saying, and you got to give them some sort of objective.
Yeah.
I mean, something to go after, because that really envelops the Antares system completely for me. I mean, that's a great idea. Is it gives them a flavor of the story, and not only that, it teaches them the game. Many games I've played starting out, it has been a pitched battle, and that's what I'm used to, and that's kind of what I said is like that's how I learned. But when I started playing those scenarios that had some sort of specific thing you had to do, I was like, oh wow, this game's got something.
Yeah, it gets back to what Not Jay was saying about the D&D background to it. It's very much buys into the fact that you're starting to think more about what you're doing, getting involved, buying into the story and the narrative behind it. And that's where Antares is so strong, because of all the fluff. Sorry, the rich history and background. Of course.
Rich, fluffy history.
Not Chase. So Nache, you haven't said much. For you, I know it was this show that kind of made you go, yep, I'm going to do. For you, what are the things that, just having the little experience that you've played, if it wasn't for the pandemic that we have, we'd actually have 4 or 5 more games in with each other. But for you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because the plan was to, come down and play at least once a month, but we're having to get our games in remotely now. But, I just, like I said before, I liked the idea right off the bat that it could be very much a narrative-driven game. If y'all ever remember both the British version and the American version of Whose Line Is It Anyway, points don't matter. I could give 2 fluffy squirrel tails about points. And I've got friends that are heavy tournament play, 40K people, and they're coming at me with, and then I get, and for these many points, like, I don't care. When I got back into gaming, about 15 years ago, of course I went back to 40K, because that's what I left with. And the only reason I played in tournaments is because I knew I could get 3 games in every weekend. And a buddy, he's a friend of mine now. We first met at the game store. He was getting back into gaming again for the first time in many years. And we ultimately, because we sucked so badly always, we would end up meeting up in the second round, and then the tournament guy would come back to us and say, okay, well, I hate to do this to you, but I got to match the 2 of you back up, because even though y'all played each other, y'all played to a draw. So that puts you on the bottom of the list, and I got to match you up. Okay, fine. And we became really good friends. What was funny is we were both playing Blood Angels. So we both had Death Company. So the game always just ended up us pushing our Death Company into the middle of the board and just rolling dice and pulling them out of the pile. Is this one yours? Yeah. Okay, that one's yours. But the point is like, I didn't care how I got to 2,000 points.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had to have 2,000 points. With Antares, I can see where I can create a backstory as to why Algren are fighting Concord and have separate objectives, and whether the Algren have just a perfunctory skimmer force that's doing some scouting, meeting up with the main line of defense for the Concord, and hilarity ensues, or it's two equally sized. Again, points don't matter, and the great thing about the game is that skimmer force, which might only have 3 or 4 dice to pull, can be strong enough to take out an entire, strike force of the Concord. So, the reason why we play the game is because you never know how the dice are going to roll. So that, I enjoy that. As for getting into the game, I cannot suggest any more heartily than the Strike on Kara 9. That it's literally right now, because of the big book, you buy the big book, you get a crap ton of models for free.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a crazy deal.
That's exactly the way I look at it. Because what is retail value of the book? $40?
I think it's 30 something, yeah.
30 something? Yeah, so for you buy, if you're going to buy the big book at whatever price it goes to, let's say it's 35, an extra $15, and you've got
almost 2 legal armies.
You got literally, handfuls of miniatures.
I'm cringing at the way you were holding those.
Huh? What?
Cringed.
Be careful.
They haven't been painted yet.
Okay. Okay.
No, if it was a painted one, it would be like this.
What'd you say, Tim?
No, I was just joking at you flinching.
Yeah, we all see it.
No.
Being that most of them are metal and some of them have the, the little pieces that you got to glue on that are a little fragile.
So I actually, for these guys, the Algren Crisis Strike Suit, whatever the hell they are, Hazard, that's them. I gotta go pick up a couple of 1-inch washers from work, because damn, those things are heavy. They do not want to stand up by themselves. But they you can't go wrong with that box, because not only do you get the book and the miniatures, but you're getting all the dice you need. You get the pull dice, whatever those things are called. Where's all my stuff? There's all my stuff.
Whatever you
want. Like a quick plug here, both Rocky's War Room and the Tabletop Warlords has an unboxing video for the Strike and Car 9 if you guys want to see all the intricately.
Theirs is better.
What can I say? We're amazing. No, I'm kidding. Rocky's is also amazing.
And we cut the solid gold.
And the fact that they put in the plastic pen markers.
I like the pen markers. They're spin down. I never use them as a spin down though, because I like to put a bunch on them. You can do the little, oh hey look, I'm going to twist it to the next number, but that's garbage.
Like a
lay this crap out. I mean,
I want to see
they're pinned. Lay out 5 of them on a unit.
It does actually. It is always more fun to actually have more pin markers.
I feel the same
To
way.
be able to actually see these pins come out.
They give you these things, whatever the hell this stuff is for.
Battlefield and Space Pineapple.
I just made a rabbit.
The two curved ones are you don't need them for Algorin, but drones you get buddy drones which project them, and they are batter shields. So they
and then you get these little tokens for whatever the hell they are used for. You get cutout terrain, for God's sakes.
The cutout terrain is cool, and you get like a pseudo battle mat in the bottom of it.
And
really cool poster.
Yeah.
Everybody likes posters. There you go.
You get the battle mat on one side. You get the kick-ass picture on the other side.
I've got like
Not
5 of
wait.
I mean,
An Algorand Fortress.
this right here is worth the price of admission. Not really, but
it's gaining on it.
I mean, for $50, all I can say is, in the electronics business, in the electronics business, there is something. There are products called loss leaders.
Yeah.
This has got to be a loss leader for Warlord games, because there is no way they're making money off of this. This specific box. Now, how they make their money is when dumbasses like me decide, oh, hey, I need more and more and more and more. Yeah.
I've only bought 2 Strike on 9s already.
Yeah. And you know why?
Yep.
You know why you've purchased 2 of them? So you can have the battle mat and the poster at the same time. Why you buy 2?
I am the Omni being. There can only be one.
So, do you guys have any final thoughts to tell beginners that you think that they should know starting off in this hobby?
Did we cover all the armies?
No, we did not.
No.
We will.
The main thing is, I think
Okay.
the main thing is just think about what your favorite way of playing. Accept that Antares is going to be narrative. Accept that every army is different. And will only respond if actually used in the way that best suits it. But think of the best way you like playing, and then pick the army that suits that. If you like getting in tough and dirty, then perhaps pick Gar or Boromite. If you like something which is a little bit more of an intellectual demand, then go for Isaurians or Virai. If you like fairly vanilla armies, which are actually easy to use, but nonetheless it can actually be quite cool and quite powerful, then Small of course. And if you're consider yourself a great mixed forces, or you consider yourself a real hardened combat veteran, a Roman soldier, if you see what I mean, then go for the Algorian. If you like playing around with all sorts of odd, cool things, it's just great fun, and go for the Freeborn.
Well, trades, master of none.
Well, actually, they are master of one trade.
That's true. That's true.
And unfortunately, that's trade.
Yeah.
So all the time that you're actually shooting at them, note that they're in the background saying, what if they're shooting at us? We can always sell them more ammunition.
Keep it going, boys. They're buying them.
Yeah.
Starter sets. It's great. No.
Yeah.
I would say there's a really good way of going about it, because obviously anybody getting into a war game, there's a lot of stuff. Nexus is one of the best sites I have ever seen for a war gamer. Like, you can look at all the different factions. You can look at examples of battles. You can look at, it'll literally tell you how each faction is run, just like we did today, and it'll go over it very easily. And then the second step is that if you want to get everything in one kit and caboodle, do one of the starter sets. But if you're someone who, wants to be more specific about where you start, get a digital copy of the rule book so you can kind of look into it yourself. And then all the starter armies that they provide are great anchor points for any of the factions. They're going to give you most of the units you need while giving you a few of the neater units, and then you can always complement them with individual lifters or vehicles or whatever. And then the other thing is that it is important to note Warlords is an amazing company in the sense that they do deals all the time. I love
They're sale crazy.
Yeah, they do sales usually at Black Friday. They do sales for Christmas. They do sales, middle of the summer, stuff like that. So just keep an eye out. Sign up for their newsletter. Sign up on the Nexus. Make sure you're in the know. And it's going to come down the line that you can grab a hold of what you want, at one of those opportune moments. And it's really not that. I mean, it's not that crazy to get into the hobby. I mean, you can get quite a bit in comparison to a lot of other war games.
Oh man, that was the point.
On the Nexus, www.gatesofAntares.com, there's actually Antares Base 1, which is a pretty full function set of rules, which will actually cover most.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
You can download that for free, but then there's actually the online army list, which are also free, but you mentioned that before. And there's loads of information on that as well if you want to get into it. Backstory, armies, how to do it. Not Jay, what are you showing us there?
So the probably the biggest thing that comes in the Strike on Kara 9 box set is the Start Here book.
Yeah,
this thing, it gives you a little bit of backstory, but it starts you off exactly where you need to start, and it steps you through how to build each and every one of your models. It then explains all the little different gewgaws that you get, so you know what the hell you're looking at. And then it goes through and gives you the basic rules on how to play the game. What I then really like is that it starts talking about scenarios, and each scenario adds rules to build on the previous scenario. Which it's if you go from page 1 to page 2 and just work through the scenarios, by the end of the book, by page 26, you'll have all the information you need to play the game. And I love on page 26 the header of the little text block is "What now?"
Right.
And then again goes into more bits of backstory.
And the map. That picture.
That is the Antares art is great.
That right there is my favorite picture out of all the pictures.
Yeah.
It is the universe. I want one blown up and put right there on the wall. Because I think it's so cool to look at.
It also goes through and talks about each of the different factions.
Yeah, it gives a pretty good overview of all the factions.
Of what's in the box. But then it gives you pictures. If the Algren or the Concord aren't your gig, and understandably they might not be for a lot of people, we get to see the pictures of all the other stuff and go, ooh, this is so cool.
Candy.
And the other cool thing about that book too is that it's like everything that it's building up on is using the stuff that you get. So it's like, once again, it's like you don't have to worry about having a legal tournament army. You can just use the units in there. It shows you how to do it. it's
even
fun.
shows you how to paint your dudes.
Yeah.
Step by step. This is how you paint Concord. This is how you paint the Algren. This is how you base your models. I mean, it literally takes you from point A to point B to point triple Z. That was for you, John.
On the Tabletop Warlords channel, we actually play through each scenario in there. If you guys want to, if you want to look at it before you buy it, you can watch us play through every single one of those scenarios. And we have a game for almost every faction on our channel if you want to get some flavor for stuff as well.
I would say that's only a shameless plug, but it is the truth.
Absolutely shameless.
I mean, I found out about Antares because I saw Matt's videos. I saw the tabletop
the noise sector. Remember that?
Sector,
tiny soldiers made of flat.
But yeah, it's like if you're someone who likes to watch how to good game, there's plenty of videos online that show little tutorials of how to play the game. It's fun.
If you want to help building the models, or if you have questions or about does this piece go there? I've got over 70 kits, and I've got way more over there that I still haven't done yet that are in the works. So I mean, I eventually will have a video for every single kit in Antares.
Matt's Let's Build videos are really, really good at it.
Yes, they are.
It'll keep you from putting your Viri legs upside down.
I like my upside down Viri legs, and you can't tell me otherwise.
or in my videos, they're put on in the wrong way in a couple of them until
a minor programming error before they had to destroy that drone.
Exactly.
I don't know. I feel like I saw a variant combat drone that you just held up, Najee. So maybe you should go back and check out that combat drone. I love it. It looks like the Reliant.
Yeah, it does. Right color and everything.
Yeah.
If you need another one,
we've not really touched Boromites, and we've not really touched Isaurians as a starter army. Or starter forces. We could leave them another one. I just don't know. They're probably not good starter armies as something like the Concord and the Algren, which we've just discussed, or the Freeborn. But if you really like, as I said, if you like a bit of finesse, then try out the Isaurians because they can be really sneaky. Because they've got a engineered phase sniper who can actually hide and can actually phase out time for a while and actually get off 6 shots at once. Or
Lady Luck.
With any luck, mine only fires once at a time. So he
same here.
Out, and then he has a cup of tea and then thinks, better shoot, bang, So everybody else just don't worry about it.
That's only happened to me a couple times. All the other times I get more than one. So it's different from other people. I guess it may be the way the dice rolls or something. I don't know. But I call her Lady Luck now, and she literally has, and I would show you, but I'd have to grab it. And she has a decal now because she's Lady Luck of the ace.
Nice.
On her underneath the actual gun itself, which you won't be able to see from the tabletop. But if you pick it up, you're like, oh, ace and hole. All right.
Yeah,
Lady Luck.
I love the phase sniper as a model, and they can be, if you manage to get them out shooting first, they can be set up ahead of the army. This is where you need finesse. So, but if you set them up in cover and you manage to get your first dice out, they can then phase out, start shooting up enemy, and then they can go down, which means they've also got a camera drone, which means they can't be seen. So it means your opponent has to now start swamping them with scout probes to try and spot them, and things just start piling up. The Isaurians, you can start off quite well with a couple of phase squads. I'd always suggest getting a phase sniper just because they're so good. But the other thing I would suggest is try getting a few Zanra as well. They are
just about to say Zanra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, the Zanra. Ugh.
I love Zanra. Yeah, a Taurus squad and a Togra is my base for every single Isaurian army.
And the Togra, or space, or Dackle whale, is I think one.
It's my favorite transport model.
I love taking the drone commander.
Lovely. it's the Decker whale is lovely. It's a great model. I've got 2 or 3, I think. I know I've got three. Just because
I'm jealous.
It looks so good. Well, it's just hard to pay for them. But they just look fantastic, and they can actually pour a fair amount of fire, and you can shove in some Sanwa in them all, probably all just curled up, and then they can deliver them. So, yeah, probably transport Sanwa, some phase squads, and the phase sniper is a good start. But they can get some really fast bikes quite quickly. But that's a good starting thing. The Boromites, probably. One of the work gangs, one of the heavy tractor molds, probably quite good.
My favorite.
Do go for lava mites.
Lava mites on suspensor platforms.
An upgrade the leader to have a suspensor platform so you can go fast. You can upgrade them to rock brood as well. Lava mites are little geneered species who eat through rock, who the Boromites use for mining purposes.
So basically, they use hordas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much like Hortus. So and every time we look at it, you can't help but think of that sort of thing. The difference being is that Hortus was a mother. Yeah, in the Boromite army, the mother of all these is a lump of. It's a model that's this big.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if I can grab one.
It's a brood mother. Yeah, great. That would be lovely. It's the brood mother, and she is tough, but she is a strategic choice. She doesn't move very fast, but she's got hatchlings crawling out of holes all over her body. So she's an absolutely lovely model. I love her to bits. It's a great model.
That was my first video, that I ever did.
That's a good
it
one
was
to start
Brood
with.
Mother. I loved the model, but I was looking online all over the place to find something that says, how does this fit together? And I figured it out, and I recorded it, and I was like, yay, I did it right.
Yeah, cool. And she's got like 4 weapon mounts in her body, and she's quite fun. But you can only bring her in really in top end games, unless you just want to say sod the lists and just say, well, we've got a whole bunch of lava mites and a brood mother. So yeah, the lava mites are really great. The Locomites are actually really quite fun, but they're a little bit weak. We've really upped their capability in version 2. That is a Locomite in Sergei's right-hand side. In fact, that's a Guild S riding on her Locomite. They don't have to be green. They can be any color you like. But they actually just run fast and they spit lava. Whereas the Broodmother in the here, as you can see, she's got weapon mounts all over her body. She's got lava mites coming out of holes left, right, and center all over the place. And she is heavily armored, and they've put armor projectors on her. And the driver has just basically drilled a hole in her back and thought, well, I'll sit here and control everything. Yeah, it's there's another Guild S. Lovely. That's the other
nice.
Guild S.
I love the Guild S model.
Angus Stalin on her Locomite as well. The main problem is that you need to be a little bit careful about using them. They're not as tough as the rest of the army. But as I said, that's something we fixed in version 2. So Locomites are really good to get now.
Well, I love the Boromites. I always have to have the mass compactors. That's my favorite weapon that they have. And it's just, the story and everything that goes along with it. It's just awesome.
On the work gangs, you can't go wrong with the work gangs. Sometimes it's good to have a couple of just security guys, the gangers armed with mag guns, simply because they give a little bit of range reach. And if you can, do get some of the support weapons of the Boromite.
Yeah, an X launcher. And honestly, we should probably say this for almost every army. Your first support team, probably an X launcher with net ammo. X launchers with net ammo are
smaller ones, not the big old X.
Yeah, like for every army, that's like probably your base support unit. It's really cheap, it's really good, and it just works in pretty much all situations.
If it goes off, right? I'm gonna shoot these two over here. Well, that didn't work.
Yeah. Kevin is notorious for rolling 10s on his overhead.
Yeah.
My shots always deviate. I swear to God. Like all of my gunners are like, okay, we got him zeroed in.
It's true. So many of your battle reports I'm watching.
It was 50 feet off. I was like, what's going on?
I'm hollering at Kevin before he even rolls the deviation. I go, yep, it's going way that way. And sure enough, it does.
I strategize around Kevin's rolls being poor.
Whatever.
So I think, guys, there's a lot of information in this episode. This is the longest, with the exception of the first one we did, podcast. So many things that we, as Antares players, I hope, and Nache can handle all this information. He's been with us for a while, but go to bits and pieces. You can listen to a little bit at a time, get your models out, check it out, what we're talking about, throw them out there, see what happens. There's a load of information. And then as we go in the future, we will talk more specifically. Okay, we're going to, say, okay, this is the Bormites army. Here's what this does. Here's what this does, that sort of thing. So this is not the end of, talking about stuff for beginners. There's more to come from this.
Yeah. This is our info dump.
Yeah, our info dump. And we're so excited to talk about it. And this excitement is really what I love about every Antares player. Majority of them have this excitement. You're either really into it or you
haven't heard of it
yet. And you're like, oh, kind of like Warmud. He was like, what's Splitfire? Oh my God, that's amazing. We always find something new. And that's what attracts me to the game, is there's always something. Even me, being in this for 3 years now, I think it's been 3 years, there's still stuff I'm going, I didn't know I did that.
Endless depth.
Huh.
Yeah.
Really? That's
why I love doing these episodes with you guys, is we all get so worked up and
I know. I'm so mad that the pandemic's happening. All I want to do is play Antares.
That's why I want to have Nacho to come over here.
Yeah.
Justin Bruce, he's a local guy who we found as well, who painted up a bunch of Algren.
Oh, nice.
And when the pandemic's over, you guys coming out here, we go in there,
that'd be awesome.
We
could have a.
I'll say we'll meet in the middle and have a demo game.
We'll do a battle report in an IHOP.
I also had plans of doing not an Antares Day per se, but an Antares Palooza, and where every table will be a different planet, and depending on who wins or loses, we'll go to that harder or easier planet, where the terrain on the first one is the easiest terrain to deal with, and the terrain gets significantly harder the higher the table you go up.
It ends with space vacuum and volcanoes.
like my idea for the last one is half of the table you literally have to roll to see if you can get across these little caverns.
Nice.
And you're shooting from a distance, and you have to have support, but yet you do have to have that up close, because they can get in your face and come around the back, kind of like what's that battle? The Battle of 300.
Thermopylae.
Where there's a goat path, and then in that final one, there's a goat path around you. So they can get you from behind. And that would be like, okay, our two winners are going to play on the toughest terrain table here.
Yep.
You got plants that will eat you if you get close. Things like that.
Me and Kevin have a phase wasps. Kevin made a bunch of really cool phase wasps nests.
Yes,
that's fantastic. Mine were stinger bees, but that's
murder hornets.
Murder hornets. Yeah, you could have that.
No comment.
But the idea of Antares Palooza would be to have, here's a certain set of players, and the tables get harder the more you win, or they get easier if you lose, from wherever you start. Or you can be like Nache, stay at the same table the whole entire time with the easiest terrain, which is a couple trees,
Yeah, the trees that somehow, when I roll the dice, they fall on me.
Sergei. Anytime the worst enemy, the nemesis of Sergei and Antares is just plain forests.
I have lost so many games to forests.
It's literally
insane. It's for some reason, when I'm like a general, I train my troops for every sort of possible terrain, and then we get to a forest, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to teach them how to brachiate. We don't know how.
Your Victorian phase troopers are just losing their boots in the mud and getting tangled up in creepers.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh God, is this poison ivy?
Start Sergei on the forest table, and nothing but forests.
Oh god, I don't want that.
We always have. I mean, see, that's part and parcel of it as well. We always. I've got terrain for a whole bunch of specific different planets, and there's something which actually goes really, really well in Antares. If you just, I was thinking, I haven't made it, but it's in the pipeline to actually make a video or a Freeborn Shard episode, which actually says, look, this is how I go about making terrain, and that is thinking about what sort of planet or environment am I actually looking at, and then building everything to that, and you can just have some great fun. So at the tournaments, we often have a couple of Shamacide tables, we sometimes have a couple of Tolek tables, we have a couple of Taskar tables. So it's all different planets which are focused on whether it's jungle, whether it's blasted desert, or whether it's frozen tundra or ice. You know, so
I think that would make for a great episode as well, talking about terrain.
Yep. And we have a terrain expert at the
all I can talk about is a arboreal moon offset in a mysterious system.
It hangs as a gemstone in the Viridi system, Omega Viridi.
Yeah, because I'm like, me and Tim are from this, like, two peas in the same pod, because I'm like, okay, so if the gas giant was the largest thing in the atmosphere, obviously we're going to have some interesting weather, so I'm going to have to take into account the gravitational flux of all the systems in the field. And then we're like, and also giant turkeys, blue turkeys, they live everywhere, they're succulent.
Oh my god, yeah, I forgot about the ghost of New Turk New. That was needless to say, that was our battle report that got some of the least views.
I'm looking forward to your Christmas one where you're having to rescue this guy dressed in a red reflex armor with trimming, and then
we'll green stuff like a fat belly onto a white beard onto a Gar outcast.
I was just about to say, I was like, flip that around. They already got a belly. Give them a beard. You're good to go.
Exactly. Yeah. We can have them stealing presents.
The one guy that came out wrong, that is like, instead they're like, we hate humans, and it's like, yeah, but don't you want to give them presents? And they're like, no. What are you talking about? I just want to give presents to them. You know what I mean? Like, everybody deserves.
I will kill them, but also a gift.
Well, I also in the book there's specific scenarios that like the big reactor or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a picture of it and a good description enough to where I could build one of those by taking two solo cups and popping it on top of each other and taking strips of card and putting it around it. And I'm actually going to be doing that eventually. But it's just that's something that. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about creations. We'll talk about what terrain does and things like that. And I think that would be a great episode to do. Maybe we'll do that one next. I don't know.
That'd be fun.
But man, it's been 2 hours. Thank you, Tim, Sergey, Kevin, Tabletop Warlords, not Jay, the newbie man. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us for Antares Adventures episode 11. I screwed it up at one point. I think it's episode 10. I'm sorry, I'm reading a comment here. Hang on a second. Here we go. I'm in it. So thank you guys. And last but not least, from me to you, ta-ta, and we'll catch you in our next Antares Adventure.